Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have some people coming in from all over the world, so we are representing all time zones. Welcome to the 5th End of Life Tech for Healthcare. If you've just joined, go ahead and tell us who you are, where you're coming in from, the type of work that you do, why you wanted to join this session. This is the 5th in the series, as I mentioned, where I get to hang out with my friend Silvia Perez-Protto, and the idea is very simple. There are incredible advancements happening in the end-of-life space and the serious and critical care space and the bereavement space around technology. And there are incredible tools that are available to us, and most of us are so busy as clinicians, as activists, as frontline workers, as professional and even just everyday caregivers that we don't know about all of the incredible tools that are available to us. So we decided let's create a moment each month where we introduce you to 3 founders and we learn about their platform, their product, their initiative, and then share it with the world in the form of articles and the video that comes from this. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Silvia from the Cleveland Clinic, who's the director of the End of Life Center and an anesthesiologist and many, many other things. Silvia, what's new at the Cleveland Clinic these days?
So, hi, thank you so much for having me again. I'm so excited for today. Well, here we are in the midst of preparing the Summit for Empathy Summit that we usually do in a big meeting with everyone. And it's going to be the 2nd year virtual. So I want to share with you news about it. We are having amazing speakers. For example, Kelly Leonard from Second City. He's going to talk about how we use improvisation and we can use it as a way of connecting better with our patients. Like, for example, Laura van der Noot, she's going to talk about tools to help us caregivers to deal with the trauma of seeing our patients sometimes in difficult situations and how to keep us healthy. I think it's something that we need desperately, specifically for this pandemic, right? And then, for example, always we have patient stories. So we have an amazing story with Daisy Yu, who had a lot of surgeries in the hand, and she became a classic pianist. So I think her story is going to be also very inspirational. These are the 3 highlights of the summit, and I wanted to share with all of you about it. So now tell me your news about what's going on in the EOL community.
Yeah, absolutely. The Patient Experience Summit, if you haven't been, I highly recommend it. It's actually where I met Silvia.
Yes.
And I was on stage at the Patient Experience Summit, and I said, hey, in front of about, I don't know, 1,500 clinicians from around the world, the lights blinding me, and I put out this challenge to the clinicians in the room saying, we want to build a healthcare edition of Death Over Dinner. And Death Over Dinner is a project that I started to get people to talk about their mortality. And we didn't see a great adoption by the healthcare world. And clearly there is such a need for clinicians and patients and families and care teams to have conversations about their own mortality and their own grief. And so I put out this challenge to the audience, and Adrienne Boise, the Chief Experience Officer at the Cleveland Clinic, gets on stage with me at the end of it and says, Michael, actually, I've just talked to Silvia and we want to build the healthcare edition with you. And then turned to the audience and says, I challenge all of you to partner with us. And she was like, it's okay, can we build it with you? I was like, yeah, that's great. And so what started this brilliant friendship and partnership, and we helped create an app called The Pause together with Jonathan Bartels, which gives care teams the ability to pause when there is a death in a clinical setting. And that's on all of the different app stores, et cetera. So that's where this partnership began, is actually at the Patient Experience Summit. So I highly recommend it. Now you don't have to fly to Cleveland, which I recommend also when you can, but you can join anywhere. And as Silvia mentioned about, for those of you who are new to it, EOL is a new platform, EOL.community, that has been in beta for the last 6 months. We've just been testing it, bringing on providers, creating great planning tools for end of life and bereavement. And we're just now in a rolling launch of the full site. So one thing, for those of you that are providers or you host events, you can now host events on EOL. And so talk to us, talk to Kaylee, who's the producer of this. We can have you host your events for free on the platform. So we've already had something like 10,000 people RSVP to EOL events over the last 6 months. So we made sure it worked. So now that's new. We have a new planning tool that's about to launch. The marketplace is functioning. People can find providers. There's incredible content. And we just built courses as well. So there's courses coming from the New York Zen Center, from Megan Devine, grief courses, et cetera. So a lot. But we're here to learn about 3 incredible platforms. And I've been wanting to talk to Hansa and have him share about WeCroak since we started this platform. So Hansa's here. WeCroak is kind of like one of the stars in the end of life space. And recently met Mike Jordan, who built an incredible and very elegant solution for people that are wanting to gather a care team around them, somebody who has a diagnosis or someone who's struggling with something in their life or just needs some a care team within their community and family, and built this beautiful solution, CircleOf. And first we get to hear from Leah Schuster, who I've been a fan of for a while, hearing about what she was going to build and then watching what she's built with an incredible team, a new platform called Alula, which is for people that have received a cancer diagnosis, are in treatment, and family and loved ones that want to support those that are living in some form of cancer. And so I would love to turn it over to Liya and hear about the origin of Alula and what it is.
Michael and Silvia, thank you so much for having me. And Hansa and Mike, it's so nice to meet you and everyone that's joining us. I was just before this on a grief podcast with a woman who started a podcast called The Grief Coach. So it is, it's just really nice to be in a community of people who are really focused on how to use digital experiences to make this superhuman and ancestral pain more modern and easier. And we're at Alula, we're really focused on doing that in the cancer space, as you shared. So I'm gonna, I'll share my screen really quickly. Over a year in, this doesn't get easier somehow. Does everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So hi, I'm Leah Schusterbeeder. I am the founder and CEO of Alula, and our mission is to make cancer less lonely. I'm building this from 5 recent years of painful R&D, first as a caregiver, then as a patient, and most recently as a cancer survivor. My mom got diagnosed with breast cancer in 2016, and I joined my father on her care team with my 2 siblings as she navigated 5 different lumpectomies and 2 different types of mastectomies with care teams across Memorial Sloan Kettering, New York Presbyterian, UCSF, and others. When my mom had her final surgery that created clear margins, I thought that I would be done with the OR and the waiting rooms in these facilities, but the universe had a different plan. I got diagnosed with a rare form of lymphoma a few months later. And most recently, I've been fortunate to be celebrating 2 years of remission. This picture is our good friend, Dr. Ritesh Kotecha, who is oncology fellow at Memorial Sloan Kettering. He did residency with my husband in Boston. And when we got the diagnosis in January of 2018, my husband stepped out of the ER and called Ritesh and was like, where do we begin? And what stunned me about that moment was that here are two people who did their residency at one of the Harvard hospitals in Boston, and they didn't know how to begin with a cancer diagnosis. And I was just sitting there like, well, how the heck is anyone else supposed to do it if the two of you don't know where to start? And that was the real origin story for Alula. As you can see with this time, a little bit of this timetable, like many patients, the road was rocky for me. Like my mom, the road, every time when I got the diagnosis, and I was smiling when Michael, you put that box song on, because when we got the diagnosis that entire week, my husband and I had that box song playing on repeat so that we both could go to sleep and not hear each other crying ourselves to sleep at night. And I'm sure many people who are listening and can resonate with that, which is why we're doing this work. But what stunned me is that through the ebbs and flows of 6 cycles of treatment, hundreds of hours of infusions, an autologous stem cell transplant, a relapse, etc., what helped the most was my love army and the people around me who were helping me figure out how I was supposed to participate in life, living with the trauma of going through cancer 2 times and my new relationship with death. I think these are the kind of the 3 main insights that sort of shocked me when I got diagnosed with cancer. I sort of thought I was mentally prepared for the logistics of the clinical world. And I kind of felt like my oncologist was really prepping me on how to interact with the hospital and how to show up to my treatment and what the logistics would be around how the treatment would evolve across different modalities over time. But what I didn't expect were these 3 insights. The first of which, cancer changes the way you interact with the world around you. It's not just about your physical well-being, but it's your finances, it's your emotional well-being, it's your work schedule, it's how much you depend on other people, and of course, the way you philosophically view life. You're immersed in this brand new culture, like you're like just dropped in overnight, and it has its own language and it has its own routines, and suddenly you go from being a normal 29-year-old, in my case, to my entire life becoming about being poked by various different needles, managing medications, managing side effects, all while grieving that my old life and all while fearing the end of my life. And then of course, you always thought that you'd be more prepared for this moment, but of course, you're in crisis mode. You're in active levels of trauma and re-traumatization. You're busy triaging yourself, those around you, and you don't know what to tell people when they ask you, how can they help? And what I thought was really it was so sad, it made me laugh. Like when my friends and family found out that I had cancer, and they would either reach out to me or my husband or my sister or my parents and sort of say, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. How can we help you? I didn't know what to say. And so I just said, you know what, we're kind of figuring things out. Your love is all you need. And so people would Google, what do I send my friend with cancer? And they would come up with the left-hand side. And so I would just get, and I live I'm currently at my in-laws, but I normally live in Brooklyn. And my apartment just started filling up with these pink blankets and motivational socks. And I got 6 copies of Michelle Obama's Becoming when that came out, which obviously is an amazing book, but I didn't need 6 copies of that. I got countless bouquets of flowers. And what made it all feel so isolating is that I was actually spending money and spending time educating myself on the right-hand side. How many hot packs do I need to get through this bout of neutropenia? This was before Purell was the hottest ticket in town, but I was spending money on different ways to manage my germs, both in the home and outside the home, a number of different medical devices. And again, I'm married to an internal medicine physician, and so Ben was helping me shop for a lot of this. But I just kind of kept thinking, how can we make the right-hand side accessible, easy to shop, and easy to educate patients and their loved ones? As I started sort of thinking about quitting my job and going and working on Alula full time, I started to also spend a lot of time thinking about the social network effect of cancer. And there's so much focus on the size of the cancer market and the size of survivors. And of course, with curative medicine, there are more survivors than ever. But I was shocked that there was less of a focus on the concentric circles around the patient, the immediate family members, and the largest support network of neighbors and coworkers and friends from childhood who, reemerge when they find out that you might be facing a fatal illness. And so when I was trying to size this market up, both for myself, when I was trying to make the decision of if I should take the plunge and try to go build this, as well as for investors, just using very, conservative estimates of a multiplier of 5 people in each concentric circle, this really starts to become hundreds of people are in this market and are touched by cancer and other chronic illnesses. The other thing that blew my mind as I was trying to understand where we could slot in was some of these statistics around how prevalent cancer is. It's actually the same incidence of cancer as it was in 1975. 1 in 4 Americans will get cancer in their lifetime, which just is a stunning statistic for me to take in. 5,000 people a day are getting diagnosed with cancer. And then what's even wilder is there's been so much money poured into curative medicine, and I wouldn't be here with you today if it hadn't been. But that means that just like me, patients are living longer than they ever did, but that doesn't mean that they haven't finished living with the after effects of treatment. Even though my hair is back and the color of my face is back and my chemo fog has faded, I'm dealing with equally serious conditions. I'm in medically induced menopause at 33. I am struggling with lymphedema in my left arm. I have radiation fibrosis in my chest and my back, which is the decaying of muscles right around my lungs and heart. I have a cardiologist because I had a pericarditis as a result of one of the chemos. And I know that as time goes on, more of these after effects will present themselves. And our goal with Alula is to really continue to stay with patients through the survivorship. So we're doing this in the next couple ways. In January, we launched with our beta experience, which captured these 3 main resources. We summarize them on finding the words, finding the stuff, and finding the truth. We wanted to launch with these templatized communication tools for finding the emails for the hardest emails you've ever had to send. We kind of did this because I brutally remember putting these emails together, and I just kept putting them off. And just when people would be like, well, can you give us a little more detail of what your life's about to look like? And it was so hard to figure out how to hold my pain, create space, and educate everybody. And so we launched this feature in January. The response has been unbelievable. It's most people's favorite feature. And I think that just says so much about how much our society is struggling to find the vernacular and the vocabulary to have these difficult conversations about how to show up. We also launched Finding the Stuff, which is our marketplace of products and ultimately services that are curated by cancer patients and medical experts that are, we are bite-sizing the cancer experience and the different moments you have throughout your treatment and recovery in terms of the medical supplies and peripheral medical supplies that you need to get through treatment. And we're selling it in a singular spot. And then we're weaving that with lifestyle content that is focusing on the conversations you won't have with your oncologist around divorce, infertility, your relationship to your career, your desire to sort of rip your life up and start all over. And we're capturing a human collection of those stories. Later this month, we're launching these 2 additional features, which I'm excited to preview with everybody. One is a treatment care calendar, which will centralize all of the different components of your care in a singular spot and start to change the zeitgeist of what does your care really look like? How do you book people to come and babysit your children while you're going in for an infusion? How do you have somebody come and pick up your prescriptions for you? How do you book somebody to drive you to your appointment? You will be able to do all of that in our care calendar. And then we're also changing how we are showing up in terms of what we are gifting those that we love and those that we want to share compassion for. And so we're launching our recovery registry, which is borrowing from the wedding registry market and the baby registry market, except we're doing it for a moment in your life that's less happy, but actually needs just as much care, if not more. And so our goal with all of this is ultimately to uplift the oncosphere and build a data set that helps oncologists understand the behavioral and lifestyle realities of living with cancer, and not just living with diagnosis and treatment, but actually living with survivorship and living with bereavement. And we're currently in conversations with healthcare providers across the country. I think COVID has lifted the curtain on how little of this data comes back to the care team in the clinical setting, but how desperate they are to understand more of how they can help their patients outside the hospital room, and how they can better triage when the patient does need to come in for an inpatient visit or does need to come into the emergency room. And so we have a bit more on the product roadmap going forward, but ultimately our goal is to really build a data set for the front end of cancer, which is spent in your living room, it's spent in your bedroom, it's spent on your subway to work, and capture how we can improve the patient's well-being by connecting those dots a little bit more acutely. So that's it. That's me, and that's Alula, and excited. I'll stick around for any questions after the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. It's such a tremendous thing that you've created and have given to the world. So it is live. We'll share. Kaylee can share the link to everybody. There is an immense amount already there, and it's growing every day. So we're gonna switch gears now and hear from, and then as Leah said, there's the Q&A function where you can, down at the bottom of your screen, where you can add questions. At the end of hearing from everyone, we will go through some of those questions. So go ahead and add them there. They might get lost in chat if you add the question there. So we're going to turn over to Hansa now. Different kind of situation that you've responded to, and that's the fact that we're just all mortal, and created WeCroak, which has been talked about an immense amount within the end of life space and also in pop culture. But tell us about WeCroak. There's some people on, I'm sure, that are like, what is this?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. And I'm Hansa, a co-founder of WeCroak. And before I get into it, I just want to say, Leah, thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story and your product. Having had a friend just get a serious cancer diagnosis in the last couple of years, I wish we'd known about a cancer registry. That is a genius idea. All these logistics happen all at once when people are least able to deal with it. And wow, I'm amazed by that. So WeCroak, though. WeCroak is an app that I made with a friend. And I know that a lot of you are probably wondering what it is. And the best visual way to see it is just to grab your phone. I know it's near you. Type WeCroak, WeCroak, into your app store. You can look at it on the store or even download it. It's free to download. And then you can see exactly what it does, which is this. It's a very simple app. It's designed to send you 5 notifications per day, reminding you that you will die. It says, don't forget, you're gonna die. Open for a quote. And then if you open the app, there will be a quote from a philosopher, a poet, an end-of-life expert or hospice person who's written about end of life, a drag queen, a comedian, a pop star. We all die, so we pulled in as many words or quotes that we found inspiring as we could. And then in terms of the core functionality, there's not much more to do inside the app. There is a membership service for some weekly challenges or to go deeper, but mostly we encourage people to take a deep breath, have a moment of reflection, remember they're going to die, and move on their day. So why would we do this? Well, I was kind of a meditation geek, I guess, doing a lot of research. And one of the things I kept coming across is that reminding yourself that you're going to die is an essential part of every meditation path in the Buddhist tradition, and part of most of the practical philosophy ways of finding equanimity, from Stoicism to other ones in the West as well. And I kept on wanting to try it. And then I came across the Bhutanese formulation, which is a small nation in the Himalayas, where there's a folk saying that to be a happy person, you just have to think about death 5 times per day. And to me, I loved the simplicity of that. And I also loved that it sounded programmable. And thus the idea of an app began. And we started it mostly because we wanted this tool on our own phones. We wanted to feel like this truth was close and to see how we felt. I'd had my own brushes with unexpected death early in life. My mother died when I was 11. So there was a lot of reasons why these practices appealed to me. What I was not expecting was for it to appeal so much for the rest of the world. We were covered in the Atlantic magazine, New York Times, BBC, Wired magazine, San Francisco Chronicle. I've lost count of all the media sources. And around the world now, over 150,000 people have downloaded this app, and tens of thousands of them are using it every day, and every month. And we're really, really proud of that. Now, in terms of if you're in the end-of-life community and care, what would you use this app for? Well, I can tell you just what I've heard from people and what we've done to sort of respond to this community that has been so good to us. One is the story of the app is a fantastic icebreaker if you want to make someone laugh when you're broaching the subject of death for the first time. I've heard that from pastors, rabbis, people in the end-of-life care community, just saying, hey, there's an app that will remind you 5 times a day. Let people laugh. That's one of my favorite things about that. We need these sort of moments that can broach the idea of death with people and just normalize it, make it closer. 2, a lot of therapists have reached out to me that they've used it as a supporting tool for people they have in treatment for death anxiety, because it really supports cognitive behavioral therapy very well. So they tell me, because it's like exposure therapy, little micro adjustments multiple times per day, just reminding you, death is real, it happens for everyone. Make this a normal part of your day. And I love hearing from therapists that they're using it in that way. And that's one way you can use it. Another way that we've heard from people who have been using the app is it can be a fantastic tool for just that grief moment. We live in such a death-phobic society that a lot of times when people have a major diagnosis or a death in the family, their support network becomes scarce. People feel awkward talking about death or about grief. They feel awkward calling, they don't know what to say. So right when someone needs their support network the most, they can feel a little bit alone. And so I've heard from people that they're using the app to sort of help them process their grief. Remember that everyone goes through this, everyone loses everything in the end, and kind of normalize that what they're going through is a universal experience and not special, unique, or a kind of suffering that is just for them. And that's really important too. Also the app functionality of having quotes from all different walks of life helps to create that sort of idea that this is a universal experience. 3, it introduces the idea of mindfulness as part of the death conversation. I think it's especially when you're dealing with end-of-life care, people see it all as bad news, but I think it's a really interesting twist to introduce in the conversation that we have millennia of tradition of using the conversation about death to actually create more peace, more equanimity, more mindfulness in your life. And even if you're dealing with the hard news of a diagnosis or a grief moment now, you can still use some of these concepts to help your general feeling today if you lean into those tools as they've been done in the Buddhist tradition, the Stoic tradition, and many others around the world. So that's kind of cool too, just to introduce people to those ideas. And finally, we've also, since the app blew up, just used our platform to create more moments of conversation. Really, our mission is how do we create more moments for people to talk about death and to build it into their life plan every day. So there's now a WeCroak podcast, and we interview a lot of end-of-life care thought leaders. Feel free to listen in or reach out if there's somebody out there that you think we should interview. Yeah, that's basically what we've been working on these last couple of years. We have some updates coming out probably in the next couple months with more stuff in the membership service and stuff like that. But the core functionality is really the heart and soul of the app is get people talking about death younger, make it into something that has some benefits as well as a hard conversation, that there might be some mindfulness benefits to having these hard conversations, plan and help people one conversation at a time get into that conversation about death while they can still make the decisions they want and the planning they want. So thank you for letting me present, and I really enjoyed it.
The podcast is great. The app is great. I think underscoring the fact that humor is such an important part of the human experience, and so often let out or not included in the end of life conversation, yet it's certainly part of the experience. And if people allow it, but the detailing, I can see like Silvia's smile about WeCroak getting bigger and bigger. She was at first like, I don't know. And then as Hansa went through and said, here are all of the levels that it's impacting people. And I love the idea of it being for a cognitive therapy, exposure therapy. It's so well articulated. So we're going to turn to Mike Jordan, and both Hansa and, oh, you were muted, Silvia. I don't know.
What convinced me to download is because he said it's not going to take too much time, because I was some afraid of having 5, notifications, but I will try it as I promised.
You have a new potential convert. So both Liya and Hansa talked about the scarcity and difficulty around care and our community of care, and what a challenge that is. I'm never going to forget the socks or becoming. But Mike Jordan created CircleOf with exactly that notion in mind, is my sense. Tell us about what you've created and where it's going, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen, make sure everyone can everyone see that? And can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Well, yeah, let's begin with CircleOf. CircleOf is a care collaboration platform that supports caregivers and those that they care for by quickly, seamlessly creating ad hoc communities of care around those who suddenly find themselves with an acute onset condition or find themselves in crisis mode dealing with other sort of chronic illnesses. We're a little different than most startups in that we were actually born out of an event with 500 people consisting of 6 really large companies, including Apple, Cisco, the University of California, San Francisco, a large payer provider network, a community health network, and so about 50 senior level executives got together and were divided into 5 teams to explore the future of healthcare, in particular, new products and services that don't exist, that should exist to support, improve outcomes for cancer patients. And it was a 2-day event, and every rapid prototyping sessions, I'm sure many of you have been to sort of these corporate innovation events. I guess what was different about this particular event was that every 90 minutes, we would come up with ideas for new products and services, and we would get visited by a cancer patient, their primary family caregiver, their oncology nurse, their doctors, and we'd get feedback on this ideation. So those 5-6 teams of 10 executives were supported by about 25 different people, including engineers, economists, market research folks. And there were some neat ideas that came out of the event. But our group in particular, we made this really interesting observation that every 90 minutes when a new cancer patient would come through with their team, there always seemed to be one person who was the quarterback of that care team, one person who was handling everything and all the responsibilities for that person's care and that care coordination usually fell upon that person. And it then sent us down the sort of research rabbit hole of like, well, let's try to understand that person and what that person's going through as someone who is supporting someone with a chronic illness. And it was the impetus of CircleOf because it led us to understand some really interesting trends in caregiving. And so in the US alone, there are 44 million people who are providing care for a sick loved one with a serious illness. It's disproportionately, these caregiving responsibilities fall upon women. Millennials randomly are a very fast growing group of caregivers. As you would expect, a good proportion of those caregivers are also sandwich generation folks. You know, they're caring for their parents as well as caring for their children as well. And that last demographic especially has been magnified over the course of the past year with COVID as more and more kids are at home doing online learning while, you know, the primary caregiver is either providing care for parent, spouse, or loved one during the sort of COVID pandemic times. There's 4 really interesting trends that are really have started to increase over the last 3 years. Mainly that more and more caregivers are actually living with the recipients of their care. Caregivers are also starting to care for more than one person as well. And we're seeing this a lot, especially over the last year. But there are 2 other sort of aspects of caregiving that really caught the attention of our team during the Living Lab. And that was the impact on employment. And you can imagine you have these large corporations with thousands of employees. They were noticing some trends within their own corporations. And so, you know, caregiving has this really serious impact on an employee's performance. So if you are working a full-time job and you're spending 20 to 30 hours a week caring for a sick loved one, that is the equivalent of a second full-time job. And what happens when you're that caregiver is you manage everything. You manage the logistics of care, medication, rides, meals, finances, and especially if you're doing end-of-life planning, estate planning, things like that. And what we were noticing as we were working with other large nonprofits like the Northeast Business Group on Health and whatnot is that employees were starting to burn out. They increased responsibilities were contributing to anxiety, stress, depression, and serious diseases actually affecting caregivers at a higher than average rate. Now, if you're lucky, when someone you know or love diagnosed with a very serious illness, you know, there's this overwhelming outpouring of neighbors, coworkers, and even strangers, you know, who help come to your help to help you and share in that responsibility. But what we noticed is, you know, as Leah said earlier on, people want to help, but usually when you're trying to manage, you know, a crisis situation, a lot of us aren't natural born project managers. And so there was a serious lack of tools to help like actually organize the support and help from that ad hoc network that all of a sudden sort of appears around you. And that's why we created CircleOf, primarily as a tool to not only support the patient, but also support that primary family caregiver to get organized around the activities of care, but also to get the support from family, friends, and loved ones. And in particular, in end-of-life care, we spend so much time putting together an end-of-life plan, finding advocates, preparing for hospital stays, and spending a lot of time actually hiring professional caregivers that have good alignment with the patient that they're caring for. And we spend so much time actually trying to put together a plan for someone else that we neglect to actually put together a plan for ourselves. And this is really important. Right now, 1 in 6 working adults are acting caregivers. As I said before, we're spending 20 to 30 hours a week caring for sick loved ones. And what happens is we wind up burning out. And as I said before, with the sandwich generation, where you're having more and more caregivers at home caring for sick loved ones, as well as children who are at home, what we're seeing is this massive exodus of people from the labor force, in particular women. Over the last year, 2.2 fewer women in the workforce, and it's unclear as to whether or not there will majority of them will return. So this latest pandemic has had sort of set back an entire generation of progress as far as women being able to participate in the workforce. So again, that is why we created CircleOf. It is this collaboration platform that supports caregivers and those that they care for by allowing them to really quickly and seamlessly create communities of care. So when you find yourself in that situation where you're completely overwhelmed and you're so busy planning for someone else's care while trying to maintain some semblance of a family life, you can pick up CircleOf and very quickly include all sorts of people in a caregiving conversation. And you can create an inner circle of your most trusted family members who are responsible for the day-to-day logistics caregiving, so managing appointments, tasks, meals, walking the dog because you've been at the hospital for 24 hours. But also we allow you to invite professional caregivers to your private care teams as well. So we've just launched in Australia with a large assisted living group, so that people who actually aren't able to visit their parents in home can actually not only communicate regularly through the attendants within these assisted facilities, but also share on their home screens everything from photos to videos, as well as have video calls directly with parents who they aren't actually able to contact. The networks that we create, caregiving networks, are private and secure. We don't share your data with anyone. And we also allow people to form public teams so that they can actually form larger support groups of people who are going through very similar experiences. We're not limited to cancer. We support unique experiences from everything from cancer to COVID-19, stroke victims, Alzheimer's. The idea is that anytime you need to build a community of care around a loved one and support for yourself, you can pick up CircleOf and build these ad hoc groups very quickly. We started out as primarily a tool for employers, because many employers pay hundreds of millions of dollars every year for benefits to actually support their employees that were going underutilized. So a really good example is Cisco, for instance, provides 12 hours of free childcare every week to their employees. And it was a benefit that was going underutilized, but within CircleOf, as people were starting to request help for childcare, and we surface these content cards, which are almost like little ads, only ads for things that you already own and that you have access to, and just reminding them that their employer was there to support them as well. So we started out as an employer tool. We went into assisted living, and just this fall, we've launched a direct-to-consumer product. So now the app is free. It's in the App Store and in the Google Play Store, and is available to anyone at any time as a tool to support them and their loved ones. So within 60 seconds of downloading the app, you can invite friends and family to your care team. We automate a lot of the logistics of caregiving. So for instance, if you have an appointment that requires some additional logistics support, say someone to take care of your kids or house sit or something while you're in a treatment or something, you can ask for help in a very generic sense and say, on this date, this time, I need someone to give me a ride, or I need someone to cook for me. And then it puts it up on the home screen, and then people who are part of your care team can then offer their support, either for every instance of it or select instances of it, but it manages all the back and forth that normally you would do with text or emails, coordinating calendars. And when things change, it notifies people automatically, makes the changes on people's actual calendars. So it just simplifies the logistics of care. But at the same time, the collaboration platform is really just this very open and wonderful place which you can actually share moments and share thoughts with people on an ongoing basis, as well as get advice from social workers and other advocates that are a part of your care team as well. So that's CircleOf in a nutshell. We just want to make sure that you as a caregiver, you as a trustee, you as an advocate for someone that you're trying to create end-of-life experiences for, that you yourself, you remain healthy, and that you bring other people into the care conversation as well to support you. So that is CircleOf. Thanks.
It's beautiful. That's just so inspiring. like at each of these, you're like, wow, I'm grateful that we have these sessions because I know about these platforms, and yet I get to learn so much more in these sessions. So thank you, Mike, Leah, and Hansa. Silvia, I know you've been penciling some questions for people, so
Yes.
I'll let you go first.
So I will start with Mike because you just talked about this. And first of all, your talk about the impact of caregivers. I can share that we were looking for the chair of our institute, our department of critical care. There was no women applying. So, it's the reason how we are living this pandemic, right? And the other thing I want to share with you and everyone is about the CTAC work on policy in order to improve the situation of caregivers that are not, part of the workforce. So I put in the chat some of the links for you to learn more about the policy work. My question to you is, how do you envision to interact your app with the patient portals like MyChart or this type of portals that we are using to connect with the patients? Is something that is possible to connect?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We purposely focused on non-clinical care. So one of our investors and our biggest supporters is Community Health Network. They're a $6 billion payer provider. They have 1.2 million members, right? But they also have a lot of connectivity to the larger sort of community outside of the hospital. And so what they were seeing is like, people would come to us and we would treat them, and then we'd put them back out into the world, not really knowing who was going to care for them or make sure that they would take care of the medication or what support they had around them. And so what we wanted was a tool that when people left the emergency room or left that first meeting with their oncology doctor, that they knew immediately that within the clinical care system, there's going to be a treatment, and we're going to, professional caregivers are going to assist you, but there's another role for non-clinical caregivers out there, and it's really up to you to be able to build that network and then, to have others actually participate in your care. So we were really looking at the white space of healthcare, and it works out. It works out actually really well. So
yeah, I love that concept, and actually we at the clinic, we have this thinking of relationship-based communication, like exploring what is possible for this patient in order to adapt the treatment that they are realistic for that patient, and knowing what are the support system that they are around. It's easier for us to develop a plan that is going to be more successful, right? So I
Right.
think it's a great, it's important to interact this community circle with the healthcare circle. So thank you so much. This is amazing. And then
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
I couldn't stop, getting emotionally going through your story. I see sometimes patients sharing a little bit of the iceberg of all is going on, right? And it's sometimes difficult for us to be able to deep dive on all these nuances that you were talking about. So my question to you is, how do you envision to empower patients to share all these nuances with us? Like I was in a patient advocacy group and learning that they prefer to talk about their wishes and worries with non-physicians broke my heart. So how we can decrease this and or build this bridge?
Well, the nice thing about CircleOf is a lot of the communication and collaboration around a patient's care happens more openly. So you actually have more people who are actually keeping their eyes on the patient's progress and whether or not the support for that patient is actually sufficient, right? And then when you add a nurse navigator or a social worker to that context as well, now all of a sudden you have multiple adults who are able to actually divide and conquer. And some people can handle the relationship with the hospital. Some people can handle the relationship directly with the patient. And when people, you see this a lot, especially with women. Our head of product is a really good example. She has 3 brothers and her mother just died 2 weeks ago, and she used our product. And her brothers, it was like herding cats. It's like they were kids again, and she had to sort of tell them what to do and how to sort of direct them. But when she was overwhelmed, it was very easy for her to delegate tasks and responsibilities off to them. And that's often really the most difficult part, is like, right there is the patient schedule, right there, all the tasks and things that need to be done. And so she doesn't have to explain it. She doesn't have to schedule it. It's really automatic. And so we worked really hard to make sure that we had a customer experience that was almost transactional, like really easy for people to ask for help and really easy for people to actually offer and assist with help.
Leah?
Yeah, what I would add, and I think that's a question. I think one of the inspiration moments for this, I have a very close relationship with my oncologist, and he's actually joined our advisory board. And what stunned me, and I'm a pretty TMI person, but during one piece, during like the second time I was in treatment, around my 4th or 5th cycle, I was experiencing very surprising bouts of incontinence. And I actually didn't know that word. I didn't know it was a direct consequence of the chemo. And I just thought something was really wrong with me. Not just that I had cancer, but like something is really, I kept soiling my pants. And it wasn't until many appointments in, a young fellow who had seen me before was sort of like, you look like you want to tell me something, but you're not telling me something. And I finally whispered to him, like, I have been soiling my pants in the Ubers to work. Like, I can't, I'm like, this is really impacting my life. And he was like, oh my gosh, it's totally normal. The chemo has weakened your rectal muscles. There's like a whole therapy group here, physical therapy group. And I just thought, what you said, why was it so hard for me to tell this doctor who I adore, saved my life? And I had so much shame and stigma around it. And I really thought something was really broken with me. And so I think that's why we're trying to do that in a number of different ways. Number one, it's why the marketplace of products is so important, because we're organizing a consumer experience where what we're doing has not been done before. You're going to be able to buy incontinence pads and liners, and we're partnering with a company called Attention Grace, which has provided a much cleaner alternative to like the Depends brand of incontinence briefs, because what's also important to me is that all of our products don't actually have any cancer-causing chemicals in them. And our goal is that by putting that all into place, weaving that with stories like what I just told you, patients will start to understand, oh my gosh, I am totally normal. Like, this is uncomfortable and crazy and ruining my day, but like, it's not just me. The way that we're trying to do that on the digital tools side is then connect with providers and connect with other partners to also continue to destigmatize the total components of your care as well. And our goal ultimately is to integrate in the hospital setting and integrate with existing clinical tools. And so ultimately, we hope that the conversation, like both the oncology team and the patient, like if we can kind of move closer over time, these very awkward components of the realities of care will start to be something that's really talked about. Very serious medical conditions like the incontinence thing, it wasn't life-threatening, or, I mean, it transformed my life, but
it's important. It was important for you in that moment. Yeah.
It was important in that moment, but
yes.
Something as serious as infertility, we know today most oncologists don't bring it up with patients.
Or sex drive, sometimes we don't talk about sex because we are all afraid of it, and it's necessary to talk about those topics. Yes.
I mean, I love Dr. Hanlon, but I'm not bringing up my sex life with him.
You should, so he helps you.
I know, but it's like, so it's interesting. I think that our goal over time is to, because he would get awkward. So I did end up finding, he would just say, oh, we have a women's clinic here and you should, and then I met the women's clinic and I was like, oh my gosh, where have you been my whole life? This is very helpful. So we're trying to do that with radically honest content. Yes. I just hired Ariana Huffington's deputy editor, and she's joined Alula a few months ago to really publish these collection of stories that have, and we're kind of creating a searchable library of these stories to really destigmatize what unfortunately is still stigmatized both by the healthcare professionals and then also in our society at large. We don't talk about this stuff on the regular. So how can we expect to talk about it when you're also managing very dangerous drugs with debilitating side effects, with potential end of life timeline? It's just, how do you prioritize it all?
Yeah, I love it. And we have very, very few, like 1 second, but I want to share with you, Hansa, that for healthcare providers, death is felt as a failure. We feel that we fail our patients, our families, when our patient dies for any reason. And we go over thinking, what did I do? Can I do it differently next time? So I wonder how many providers, physicians, nurses do you have in your app? And I will be your advocate to bring more, but do you have a number of how many physicians you have in the app?
We don't do that kind of tracking of people who download the app, so I can't give you an exact number of doctors and nurses who have downloaded it. However, I hear from people both in the healthcare and the end-of-life community all the time who've encountered it or who have it. And what I hope is that these conversations can really start to change the honesty we have about having these conversations about what the real goals are, considering that death is certain for everyone. And sometimes at end of life, amount of time surviving isn't always the best thing. And the story that comes to mind was one that my grandmother went through toward her end of life, dealing with Alzheimer's, as well as a number of other conditions. And her healthcare provider, when she came into the hospital one time, wanted her to be put in for an MRI. And at this point in her care, she, there was nothing really that a diagnosis could do for her in terms of where she was in her Alzheimer's and stuff like that. She would just be tied down in a tube for an hour and suffer terribly. And once they found that out, there's not a good outcome. So, as a family, having had those important conversations about death, we could have that conversation with the doctor and say, that's not a good plan for healthcare for her. But a lot of people just do whatever their doctors ask them to do without really thinking that through if they haven't had those conversations about what you want a loved one's end of life care to be. And so I think it's really important to have those conversations within your family and with your healthcare provider of, at what point in end of life care are we? Should we have a palliative care team on board? Hospice, what are the goals? Things like that. These are really important and critical conversations that have to come up. And often today, unfortunately, it has to be the patient or their advocates who bring this up with their current healthcare providers.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, and I could spend another hour with this review, but we're actually over time. And so we'll be back next month, and we'll be sharing articles about the three of the founders here and their products on EOL and sharing the video. So join us next month. And I think Kaylee's going to take us out with a little more Bach, and we'll see you in June or May. What is it? It's April. We'll see you in May sometime. All right. Bye, everyone.